And this is segment 2 of my talk with Charlie Maclean-Bristol. Enjoy.
First.
Well, believe it or not, you did answer a lot of questions I was going to ask.
Yeah.
But there's one that we didn't touch on, and that's if we run an exercise and we have our set objectives, one, should we change them for the next exercise? And two, how do we measure if we even met them?
See, that's a good point. And sometimes I think if you do this really well and really properly, then what you should do is you should write your objective and say, and it needs to be smart then in some way. And then you need to actually say, how do I know when I've achieved that? And also, who's going to determine that and what are the criteria I'm going to use for determining that. So you could do to say actually one of my objectives is to review the whole of the plan. Now that's not quite smart, so but that's getting a bit of it. And then you might to review the plan and make sure it's fit for purpose. You might have the objective to say actually what we are going to do is to make sure that we cover all elements of the plan and discuss all elements of the plan. And then, you're a way of saying whether we achieved it. Did we cover all elements of the plan? And did we get 3 new learning points from the plan? It's a little bit contrived that some of the ones are quite difficult sometimes it's quite difficult to do smart objectives. And I think sometimes, I can put my hands up and say I can be kind of sometimes a little bit lazy about really tying down those smart objectives. And sometimes how much value does it add? We've got something round about the scenario. So if I smarten that objective, is it going to really add a lot of value? Or I pretty much know we want to do something around flooding because we're susceptible to flooding or supply chain. And so we're going to be something about supply chain, but do we need to have a smart objective there? So I think about you can do the point about changing our objectives. Again, the Business Continuity Institute, the GPG, is busy saying you should have an exercise program. And when I was in the army, you never went straight to a battalion attack. Um, because it would be chaos because no one know what they're doing. What you need to do is you need to do what's called Pierce fire maneuver. Two of you going up there, then a section, and then a platoon, and then a company, and then you end up battalion attack, and you spend 3 weeks or a month actually practicing all that thing, and you work up to the big attack. And then by the know of that, it'll probably no attacks like all things like business continuity to go 100%, but you'll get a general theme that it is. So I think you should never go straight for let's do all big singing, all dancing exercise because I don't think you'll get value. They're expensive, they're time consuming. I don't think you'll get value as the first one. And that's why I think I like to sort of propose a 3 year program where you do something maybe sort of quite sort of basic the first year, something a bit more complex, second year, more desktop, more discussion-y or more discussion-y first year, more kind of further with a scenario, but some set pieces and then go for the all sing and all dance in 3 years and then come back again. And I think for each of those, that is a very different set of objectives. Because the third one may be more scenario based, where the first one may be more about the plans and procedures.
Mm-hmm. How do you go about communicating the fact that maybe you didn't meet your objectives for whatever reason without demoralizing people or turning around saying, "Oh, you people were just awful,
Yeah.
didn't do what you needed to do." How do you keep people focused? Say, "Hey, we didn't meet that objective, but we got a learning from it. We got a plan to move forward." How do you kind of turn a negative to a
Yeah,
positive?
it is a difficult one. It is a little bit difficult there, and it can it can be especially difficult as a consultant and maybe internally as well because you're being paid hopefully a reasonable sum of money to get them experience and learning experience, and if it all disintegrates, it might nothing be to do with your exercise, it may be to do with their response. And if you don't watch it, comes back on you because, well, let's blame the consultant for giving us crap exercise. And let's not invite him back next time. So I think there's a couple of things here. I think first of all, I would always say when I'm writing a post-exercise report, you're going to have 10. I do recommend those observations and recommendations. So you'll have 10 areas of improvement. I think areas of improvement need to be things which are things that you can take away and do. There was too many people in the team. The this telephone number wasn't there. So it's all areas which you can actually go away and do something as a physical thing. You need to include this in the plan. That number was wrong, whatever it is. I don't think in an observation recommendation you see the team wasn't very good or they didn't really work very well together because it's difficult then to quantify that. And how can you sort of say, well, we can do it better next time, we can do some training. So I think you can say actually, the team their skills were really low, they didn't log, they didn't do action. So then you can say, right, they need to, this is good practice incident management, you need to go and get some training. So
Mm.
I think your observation recommendation needs to be things that you can physically go off and do deliverables as opposed to sort of concepts. What
Mm.
we do then is within the you always have to be positive, and so we tend to write what I call as a director's comment when you do a bit of a rah-rah and you said, look, the team worked well together, they did this, they did that, and you try and positivize it as far as you can at the end of the instance. So that is your opportunity to maybe talk about some of the more softer things rather
Mhm.
than the better. But there's always that danger of the consultant when, say, you write a really positive report, they have a really bad incident the next week, they go back to the report and said, you said our team was really good. They did this incident, they were really rubbish. Well, were you lying because you want to get the next bit of work or you want to get the contract? Or so there's always a danger with the consultancy. Now,
Mm.
one of the things I did a while back was we did some incident management training for an organization. We did an exercise, well, then they were fine. Goodish, 10 observations, recommendations, or you get nice report. When we did the exercise the next year, they got worse. They were obviously got worse. And it's difficult to kind of compare. How do you say we got worse? Well, how did we get worse? Show us how you got worse. And you kind of run slightly into this little bit of she said, he said. So one of the things I invented was we call our instant team performance assessment. And the idea here is we have a quantitative assessment of the team. So what we did is went off and did a lot of work on what does good instant teamwork look like. So there's lots of stuff on teamwork. The Google team is the ultimate team. So Google's done lots of stuff on that. But there's lots of kind of instant management. If you go 22361, the crisis management center, the GPG, all the books we were talking about earlier, they're all stuff with sort of useful things you ought to do in an instant. So you need to take those. We took those out and distilled them down to, and what we wanted to do was to be able to do an assessment of the team. Now, as soon as you say the word assessment, it has a whole load of implications.
Mhm.
So some public sector won't touch it with a barge pole. We can't use the word. Some people say we'd like you to do this assessment, but we don't want people to see it, and we don't really want them to know that you're doing it, which I don't really like. But you can do that. Some people say we're quite happy to be assessed. But what we did is we divided it into two bits. So we did an individual self-assessment. So every member of the team got a two-sided page, and it had I think it had 8 questions, and they were around about the team. So he said, did you feel that the team was the right side? Did you feel that you were listened to? Did you feel you had a task? Did you feel that there was a good team leader? And we also then did a plan assessment similar. But what we did is with quantitative, so we didn't just say out of 10 or out of 4. We said in terms of the team leader, I felt the team leader was not very good. I felt the team was slightly good. I turned the team was reasonably good. I thought the team leader was excellent. So there was a text associated. So, your 3 may be my 4 or somebody else's 2. So we put some text around it. So when people were ticking that box, they could say, it is a little bit of differentiation. So we did that for the individual, and then we had umpires, and we normally have at least one umpire from Plan B, and that's different to the guy running the exercise. Because if you're running the exercise, you're running around trying to make sure this exercise works and everyone's happy. You don't have time to look at the team. So we have an exercise from Plan B or 2 sometimes, and then we'll take an umpire or 2 from your organization because you can pick up stuff that we don't, gave them an umpire assessment sheet, and what we were looking there for incident management skills. So were they logging? Did action points? Did they take decisions? All that kind of stuff there. We got some comments around about communications, reputational management, because whether it's kind of operational, strategic, there is always an element of comms in there somewhere. Use of the plan, recovery management. So how well did they manage the incident, and also within that we said how much well did they actually understand the scenario and the response to the scenario. So you might have some predetermined responses. It might be a product recall plan, it might be a cyber plan, it might be a supply chain response plan, or it might be just a building burning down. But do you have confidence somewhere about they know what to do in those circumstances? So we then crunch all the numbers there, and then we can do a baseline, and we can go and say, right, there's all your little graphs of these the strengths, there's the weaknesses. So we'll write some notes down there. And what you can do is baseline it, and you can also do a kind of like industry average. You can say, like, most people we see are a 3.5, you're a bit above it. But what the real benefit of that is running it for a number of years.
Mm.
So we can actually start to find organizations. One organization, I think we've done 4 now, and we can show continual improvement of different bits. Sometimes they slip down a bit, but it also gives them a focus of to say, actually, one of the things you didn't do bad is your knowledge of the plan. And then you can turn that around and then go and say, actually, as part of my recommendations, you got a 2 out of 4 on this one. So you might want to do some more training on the plan. So that is a kind of more formal assessment, not for everybody. And you get numbers, and not everyone likes numbers. They like maybe sometimes more exercise directors kind of bit like that. But it is another way of quantitative assessment of your exercise.
Yeah, the reason I asked the question is I had an experience years ago, a big IT simulation exercise, and there had been changes in the organization itself, parent company and everything. And the IT team found some big gaps that could not be addressed. They couldn't move forward. And IT, believe it or not, was all excited. They're going, so thank goodness we found this during a test and not during something real.
Yeah.
So they were coming up with action plans, and yet on the other side, people were and executives were saying a huge failure. What's going on down there? What's happening? And it was completely polarized, the viewpoints, and it was really hard to understand. It's like they found issues, and they're happy they found issues. How can you not see that as a success?
Yeah. I think, yes, it may be sometimes in those circumstances a little bit about, expectation. If the senior managers have an expectation or the organization produce an expectation, they're pretty good at this. And then you have the kind of where they're not good at it,
Yeah.
you can have that. There was one extra little bit I would like to bring in there, which is round about this stuff, and this is some of the stuff I talked about at the BCI, was exercises are about teams of people working together, and that team is working together to produce something, an output there. And I think one of the things that I'm sort of pushing, and people are beginning to get there, I haven't seen that many people doing it, but you never know when you say that. There's lots of people out there doing it, you just don't know about it. But it's around about is actually in terms of people building a capability, and it's saying actually the people who make up my incident team, what skills and what do they require? And maybe what I want to do is even before I had an exercise, and I was talking to a pharmaceutical company just this morning, and we've done so. So what we're doing is for them is we're doing a sort of capability assessment for their team members before they do an exercise. So what they're doing is a little bit exploring where are these people at, and the sort of the five areas they're having a look at is, and you need to determine what this is first. So if you are a member of my incident team or the incident team, what is the essential knowledge that you need to do? So what do you need to do that job?
Mhm.
What are the skills you need to have? So we said about decision making, we said about logging, we said about information management. So what things you need to be able to do this? What level of competency? And when I talk about competencies, because I always forget the difference between capability and constant competency. And competency is about actually, I have the knowledge, have the skills. Can I do that under a circumstance? So I can show that I am competent to do the role of instant team leader because I've done an exercise. I've demonstrated that I'm quite good at managing the team and doing all the right sort of stuff. So that's the competency. Bring that all together. What they were having a look at is about experience. So, what is the experience of the team? Because I'm finding more and more people that you're actually, when you spend business continuity about 5, 6, 7 years, people look at you blankly. Nowadays, a lot of people have done this in other organizations. And they say, oh, yeah, I did that last one. I did that to the last one. And we did a bit of that there. And actually, was one of the coordinators or champions. So there is a kind of exposure of that. So what is the level of experience there? And also, it's a little bit knowledge, but it's also knowledge of different scenarios. So, do they understand their product recall plan? Do they understand their cyber response? Do they understand how they would deal with a major IT outage? There is some essential knowledge to do that. So, what we've done with some other clients is we actually send this question, we determine what that is first. We send out questionnaires to different teams. And then even before the exercise, we could start looking at the team and say, look, they're well experienced. They've done it lots of times. They've got pretty good knowledge. And it's all a self-assessment. Let's get them into the exercise. Look, this team's just really started. All the old people have left there. We got a new lot in there. They're pretty low level. There's not much point in sticking them straight into the fire of an exercise because they're not going to do well. And actually, exercises take time, effort, and money. You're actually much cheaper and get much better value if you actually do some training with them first. It could be internal training, not get the consultants in, do the fancy exercise, do some internal training with them first and do some of the basics before we then do an exercise, and then we'll get much better value out of that exercise. So I think that looking at your capability and doing some of the assessments, and then you can actually do this again on a year basis and we can see, right, team is pretty good. We won't do much training with them, but this team needs quite a lot of work. So put that out as a way of kind of pre-exercising and then making sure that when that exercise is sort of fit for purpose and is going to achieve something for the time, effort, and money you spend on it.
Well, we only have 3 minutes left.
Yeah.
Do you want to take a minute and give any final thought?
I think exercise is really important. I think people don't do it often enough. And I have written a book on this, so this is a plug. But I do think about short exercises in between big exercises. You see executives, you might get them for half a day a year. But if you could do a couple of 45-minute exercises every 3 months, there's a scenario, think about it 45 minutes. What are you going to do? Boom. Educating them on the scenario, get them thinking a little bit about response, and it keeps the brain cells going rather than, so much goes on in a year that you forget about what you learned. So plug in between them short exercises, a whole book worth of them that can actually do that bit. So that's my sort of plea in between the two.
Now, I have a copy of your book, but give it a plug.
Yeah, so book
Everybody
here,
know
look,
what
look,
its name is.
a business continuity exercises, a short, quick exercises to validate your plan. It's available from bookshops, from
Yeah, I do
Amazon.
have it. I did, as
Yeah.
I said before we started recording, I didn't realize I had it until I noticed the cover and I went, I've got that. That's on my shelf.
And I think one of the other aims of the book was to be aimed at people who don't maybe do very many exercises. Lots of easy exercises there for a starter, for one. If you're not terribly confident, some really easy, simple exercise, speed exercising for one, which you can do yourself, which you can do exercise your team without needing to have lots of specialist skills for doing the more sort of larger, sophisticated exercises.
Right. And on that note, we've come to the end of today's show. Charlie, thanks so much for joining. I honestly thought we were going to talk for maybe 20 minutes, 25 minutes at the most, and we ended up doing a full show. So this is great. Thank you so much for sharing your time and expertise. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me on.
No problem. Maybe there'll be a second time in the future. You never know. Yeah. So thanks very much for joining, and everybody watching and listening, stay prepared, everybody. If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave me a message and let me know your thoughts. Of course, don't forget to subscribe. And in the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.